So good evening. I'm Harold Holzer, and I have the privilege of serving as director of the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute. And on behalf of Hunter President Jennifer Rabb, I'm delighted to welcome you all and to explain this new series that we've decided to undertake. So 85 years ago, this year, Franklin Roosevelt was newly elected President of the United States, and decided a couple of days after the election to speak to the American people. So he walked or rode into the room near his library, and there in front of the fireplace gave a radio address for which he was roundly criticized for speaking directly to the people. And that, in a sense, although it isn't formally so counted, was the first Fireside Chat. So what institution has a better right to appropriate this brand than the house where the first Fireside Chat was broadcast? So we've decided to institute a series of Fireside Chats with very special people for whom no introduction is necessary, although I'll supply one. And what better person to start with than another great voice that is a part of our lives. Judy Collins has been, I hate to be corny and say the soundtrack of our last 5 decades, but she is ubiquitous and perennial and as angelic sounding as ever. And not only musically, but as an activist. From the Vietnam era through the civil rights era, struggles for women's rights and LGBT rights, income disparity, all the issues, she has lent her exquisite sound and indomitable energy to supporting and inspiring. And along the way, she somehow won Grammy nominations 41 years apart, which is the record. She's also a beloved New York neighbor, loves New York as only someone who came from another city to call New York home loves New York. And now she has written a book that we are celebrating tonight, Cravings, How I Conquered Food, which is a searingly honest autobiography, doubling, I think, as sort of a self-help book or an advice book for people about addiction and dependency, and it touches on issues other than food, about how to rise above these dependencies in life as well as art. So that said, I can't tell you how thrilled we are to welcome Judy Collins to Roosevelt.
Thank you so much.
Judy, I'm glad you're here. I'm delighted that you're here. And I do want to tell everyone that she is not wearing a prop. She had hand surgery only a few days ago. And I was going to announce tonight that we won't have a book signing, although we do have a book sales table. But ingeniously, Judy has brought a stamp.
And it's very pretty. I think you're going to like it.
And she will initial books with her left hand. So we can get a unique signed book tonight. So let me start. We talk a lot, so this is unusual to talk on a stage. This book had a lot of levels of meaning to me, and I hope we can get to some of them. But what I was staggered by, because as well as we've known each other, I never knew this, and that is that like the man who lived in this house, you had polio as a young woman, and I never knew that, and struggled, and was sort of, and your father tried to inspire you with the FDR story, but it sort of frightened you. Tell us.
He came to the hospital. I had, as many people did, in 1950, 51, polio, and in my right side, my right leg. And my father, and I was in isolation for a little while in Denver at the Children's Hospital, a wonderful organization, and everything was, nobody could come and see me. Everything was put through some kind of a machine that sterilized it. My flowers were sterilized. And it was frightening for a child, a young person. Although I must say that I was alone, of course, and I could read, which was thrilling. And I was strangely happy there. But my father was worried about me, and he sent me a note about, which was sterilized, and telling me, he's blind, and he typed, and he also wrote in Braille. And he also, by the way, used a stamp. And I only learned about this today because I thought, oh, good news to tell something to my sister that she wouldn't have guessed. And I said, I have a stamp. I'm going to sign things with it. She said, well, Daddy had a stamp. My sister sent me a birthday card this year with a picture of two girls on it, one a little taller than the other. It said, I don't need a psychiatrist. I have a sister. So my father sent me the story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Of course, we were an FDR family. We were activists. We were angry. We were infuriated all the time about something and tried to take action about it, whatever was. And my father was on the radio, so he had a radio show for 30 years, and he talked about all the things that John Henry Falk talked about in Texas, and who was thrown off the radio for the same things. He talked about McCarthy, he talked about the French in Vietnam, and he named one of our cats Dien Bien Phu, as a matter of fact.
So you inherited the stamp gene from your father.
Yes, I did.
But you write in your book that you may have inherited the addiction gene from your father. So tell us about that.
I was with a friend the other day, and he said his wife was, I said, where's my girlfriend? And he said, well, she's at the dry cleaners. I never heard that term, but apparently it's an old Hollywood term for when you went away to get dry, to get sober. I never heard it. But my father was an alcoholic. He was an active alcoholic. He was a functioning, never miss a date, do everything right, only fall apart when it's appropriate hour of the night, and show up in the morning and go to work, like nothing ever happened. So he was a food addict, and he had a tremendous amount of control. And I always thought about this a lot because he was blind from the age of 4, and he was out on a little dirt poor farm in Nez Perce, Idaho, near the Nez Perce Indian Reservation, and he was out there in the middle of the field one day, and my great-grandfather, Charles, saw him, and he was clapping. And Charlie, great-grandfather, said, Charlie, what are you doing out there? And he said, I'm listening to the barn. And he was discovering radar. He was discovering how his hearing could tell him where he was. Mm-hmm. He's standing and clapping, and he can hear where the barn is and where it isn't. And he was very, very well kept. He went to a wonderful school for the deaf, dumb, and blind, by the way, which is what it was called in Gooding, Idaho. And he learned how to get around in the world, how to do incredible things. He would never have guessed he was blind. He didn't use a dog, he didn't use a cane. And the radar, except when he was wearing tennis shoes, which he couldn't do very much, would show him where he was. He was remarkable. So the control throughout his life was phenomenal. And I think I learned a lot of that from him. And as an alcoholic, he had to learn how to control everything, including that.
So, in a way, you feel you inherited the gene.
Yeah.
And was sort of cooked in a way early because you were destined to face
Yeah,
the
no,
problem.
it's in the DNA. It's in the genetic pool. Surprising, but so true. And so often I meet people who have alcoholism, in all levels of the family, both past and present.
And I guess for both you and your father, music was sort of a way out, a way to deal, a way to cope, a way to make things sweeter and better, because your father was introducing American standards to the West. And you were appearing with him on the radio once in a while.
Yes,
as a kid,
I'd
right?
go on the radio and I'd play I'd sing a song with him, like maybe we'd sing, I love those dear hearts and gentle people who live in my hometown. And then I'd go home and practice Mendelssohn.
Because you were classically trained
Yeah,
as well.
I was from the first, I was playing all the classics and also singing in the choirs and the choruses. Music was essential to us because not only did he make his living with music and with literature and with poetry and with Mae West jokes, but he really I learned from a very early age because I had that, I could sing and play and so on. And he got me great teachers, and so I studied very hard. But I don't think it was, what didn't make life better. It was the way to live, was to make music.
And just for a second, just so people know how you went from American standards to classical music, something happened with folk.
Yes.
Was it defying your father, or was it just a change or a continued eclectic development?
It was God coming in the window, I think, in the guise of a disc jockey in Denver who played everything. He would play Rachmaninoff, and then he would play something from a Disney movie, and then he'd play rock and roll. He'd 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, and then the evening breeze caressed the trees. And then that day, I was practicing Rachmaninoff and turned on the radio, and this guy was playing Joe Stafford singing, "'Twas in the merry month of May." It was a song about the great Barbara Allen, and it just totally flipped me out. I couldn't believe. My father actually sang Irish songs, but I didn't realize they were Irish. I thought maybe they were Rodgers and Hart, And he would sing, "I'll take you home again, Kathleen." And my mother's name was Marjorie, so we worried, This is this is before we understood that. I mean, we weren't slow particularly, but we didn't get it that we were Irish for a long time. And we're Irish, and of course we're also English, but he never mentioned England because he hated England with a passion and wasn't about to give it the courtesy of mentioning it in his home. And so we had everything. We drank too much like the Irish do. And also then we had Irish Alzheimer's where you forget everything but the grudges, which I always say because it's true.
But it's not just Irish, but we could talk about that on another occasion.
That's true.
So, by the way, there will be a surcharge for the concert part of the evening. Just drop your contributions in the box
We didn't
outside.
clear it with Joe's Pub. It's okay.
So the focus of your new book is food, and it's fascinating, and we'll get into it because obviously anyone who looks at you will find it or does find it hard to believe that you have this battle that's been going on for so long. You just had a birthday. I'm not going to say what the birthday was, but you can Google it, you can look it up. You look 30 years younger than your alleged birthday, so it's probably not possible to accept your statistical report. So, but this is something that started early, the food problem, and it was augmented, supplanted, or dovetailed with alcohol issues and drug issues. How on earth did you pull through all that? I mean, how did you perform? You said you inherited from your father the gene to get up and go to work.
Absolutely. That was, and I think that's also, I think many people who are addicted also have this type A perfectionism. I must do it right. I must do it right the first time. And it was a great combination for me because all those years, I started out early singing, starting this incredible, great roller coaster career of mine, and had to keep up with the drinking. By the way, I didn't do a lot of drugs because I was really afraid they would interfere with my drinking. But but by the time I was 19, I knew I was alcoholic. I identified the hole in my soul that I knew was in my father's life, and I knew. Not only did I know that I was an alcoholic, but that I knew that I would drink until I fell over, that I would do anything to drink, that nothing was going to stop me. I didn't know anything about it. Nobody knew anything about alcoholism. What was it? Well, he drinks a lot. Well, so what? They say, well, he's Malachi was talking about this the other day. He's in the casket, and the wife looks over and says, poor thing, was he what did he die of? And well, he drank too much, and his wife said, well, he wasn't that bad. It's always sort of denied in the culture that anybody is drinking too much, or that all the problems that come with alcoholism really are always tearing the fabric apart, because so much money is spent on health care and on all the things that happen to us and the accidents that happen to us. And, we take up an awful lot of air for 10% of the population. And so I knew I was an alcoholic. And then, of course, when I got to New York, careers speeding along, always showing up, recording every year, every other year, mostly every year, success, touring, and constantly drinking, and constantly also worried about the weight, worried about the sugar, worried about the food, worried about the weight. And then the other things that everybody has problems, and I had other problems too. I got into therapy. I tried to kill myself at 14, by the way, which I think does come into this somehow. I guess it's the perfectionism, I would say. And it also kept things going. At the same time it could kill you, it could also help you. And so started doing the exercises at 23, before Jane Fonda was even around doing them. She was around making, what was the name of that?
Barbarella.
Barbarella. And immediately got into therapy when I moved here. Found a group called the Sullivanians, an Upper West Side group of, it was a cult for sure. But they were good. They were very good. And they believed that if their patients had problems with anxiety or troubled and couldn't sleep, they might drink a little. So I stayed there for 15 years. But the food was always an issue. Always. And by the way, I was always looking for solutions. I wanted to know why I felt like I should be locked up. And I did feel that a lot. The mental, I didn't want to, I had the therapy to help me with the suicidology, but I always knew that I would wind up locked up someplace. I felt that all the time.
Did your, I guess, uncanny, although you're saying it's not that rare, your uncanny ability to get it together and then give sublime performances and make perfect records, did that encourage you in any way, that it was okay to have a divided life? Or
no.
You knew it all, you just were cognizant of
the
issues and that it was hurting you?
Well, it was the mountain one had to climb. I mean, I didn't think that there was anything unusual about, after all, my father was a blind man who was very successful in spite of everything. And I guess mountains to climb are part of, maybe we all have them. It's not unusual. So, along with everybody else, I had my own mountain to climb and my own desperation to get through. It didn't seem to be, music didn't make up for it, nor did success make up for it. It was only the fact that every other week, every other month, I was on a different diet. I was always going to see somebody, or going to see Krishnamurti, or going to see the Maharishi, or finding another group, going to Est. Then the first weekend in Est, it was upsetting. And then they told you couldn't drink until the next weekend, and I never went back. So, I was always trying to fix it, but I didn't know it meant you had to stop drinking. Good heavens. I mean, that's a little too much. But I knew that I was in trouble. I knew that I had physical, emotional, mental problems. I would go from diet to diet to diet. I was friendly with all of these folks, from Atkins and the macrobiotics, and it was just constantly a balancing act. How could I get myself well enough to do what I was doing? And all the time, that was a concern. And so, the exercise, the depression, it was clear to me that I was a depressive. I didn't know what that meant. Technically, people weren't really talking about depression in 1962, except a few of us were in therapy. Maybe the whole room was in therapy. I don't know. But a lot of people were finding, particularly, thank God I was in New York, where that was something that one particularly on the Upper West Side, could do. But truly, I did find at the same time that I'm saying it was chaos, I also had the music, I had the center, I had the sanity and the quiet. And that was enforced, when you're sitting on the stage or standing on the stage and you're there for 2 hours, you can't go anywhere, you can't really say anything much but sing. So it was an enforced meditation, and it was an enforced period of health. And music always has brought me health.
Did you ever convince yourself or attempt to convince yourself that the stimulants, whether it be sugar or vodka, was helping your art? Or did you always know?
No, I was under no illusion, I did. And because of that, because the discipline that I had growing up was fundamental to what I was doing and what I was getting around, in a way, and what I could transcend. I was given incredible gifts for which I'm so eternally grateful. And when I tried to kill myself, my father wrote this letter, which Lois sometimes tells me was a peculiar letter. But he basically said, you can't do this because you have a gift and you can't destroy it. It's not the thing to tell a teenager, they don't want to hear that. But I must have heard something. So I'm incredibly fortunate. But also I had that discipline. I had to be at the piano a couple hours a day, wrecked hell with my social life, but I made up for it in the 60s. That's what I always say. But it was the people that I admired, my father being one. I thought he was an unbelievable man, unbelievably well-educated, well-read, read everything from Braille that came from the Library of Congress. All these stacks up the wall of Moby Dick, and I read everything, Dostoevsky, and he was an extraordinarily well-educated, self-educated man. Oh, he went to the University of Idaho on a scholarship. But, he read and read and read and read and knew so much. And yet here he was up against this demon. He had no idea what to do about alcoholism. No idea. Or that he had it. I knew it, but I didn't know you could do something about it. And the issue of the food was constantly at my back.
Did you have a need to hide all of this? Bulimia is sort of a private
that's
disorder.
Very private. And it happened that I was always controlling, always figuring out, always making plans, always trying to get this one, that one, this diet. And then finally, one day I discovered bulimia, and I thought I'd invented it. I didn't know about all these girl athletes who've been doing this for decades. I didn't know that from my peer group. I knew it because it suddenly occurred to me. And so for 11 years I was bulimic. And of course it damages your health, among other things. But yes, the whole idea to keep this ship going, to keep this train on the tracks, and you'll do anything. You got to get into the clothes. You've got to find a way to be healthy, so you exercise all the time. And it seems that, I'm sure there are a lot of people who live with terror all the time, and for one reason or another. And it came in and out of my life. I didn't live with it all the time because I had enough control that it would. And I was also always in therapy. Thank God I was. I wouldn't be here without it.
But, what makes this story so remarkable to me is not that you're on the other side of it, which is remarkable and wonderful, but, there are artists who aren't able to function, like Helen Morgan, and, sing and can't sing, but you always, the control that was maybe part of that DNA as well, that enabled you to keep going. Do you think it also maybe masked things in such a way that you weren't embarrassed publicly, and therefore you were able to categorize your life into what you were doing to yourself and your wonderful presentation to the public?
Well, I didn't drink when I sang, almost without question, except the last year of my drinking. And the bulimia was kind of, as you said, this secret thing. Now, of course, I'm going to skip now to I know you want to ask me ask me.
What?
Ask me what happened.
Oh, yeah. You mean the epiphany, the
I
moment?
mean, we know now that I'm in trouble, so we
We'll
want
get you. We'll get you out.
get me out of it.
No, I just want to dig a few more ditches first.
You want me to suffer a little more before we find
I don't want to make you
the
suffer.
good view?
I want you to continue inspiring everybody. You also had the political activism going. Was that an outlet too? I mean, you managed. For those of you who don't know this story, at the trial of the Chicago 7, Judy Collins was commanded. Well, you subpoenaed, I guess. You didn't go voluntarily. Subpoenaed to testify. And what was your testimony? I know, but you should say it.
I was asked by the great Kunstler. We had a little meeting. I had known these guys, the Chicago 7, and I went to their primo presentation down at the Ambassador Hotel, I think, in '68. Phil Oakes called me and said, "We're going down to the Ambassador Hotel, and you're going to sing and be present at the press conference for the Yippies." This was on the morning of St. Patrick's Day of 1968. And so he got me down there, and I knew some of these guys. I knew Abby, I knew Dave, loved Dave Dillinger. And so I was part of that. And so when they were jailed after the 1968 convention, Kunstler called me, and I knew him, and he said, "I want you to come, and we'll talk about what you're going to do, but I want you to testify at the trial." I said, "What'll I do?" He said, "Well, you'll sing. What else?" So I opened my mouth. The Judge Hoffman, said, "Hello and welcome to the," and he said, "What happened at the dedication of the Yippies in New York?" And I said, he said, "What did you do?" And I said, "Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing." And a clerk from the court came and put his hand over my mouth and shut me up.
He gavelled you down first, right? But you wouldn't. You thought it was a drum, so you kept going.
I tell you, I stopped mid-song, and the strange thing about what kind of shape I was in, that you wouldn't have known, because I looked good. I always got it together. That was the whole point of this whole drama, was to look good and sound good. But my memory of that is that then there's a black hole that comes over that, and I didn't remember anything after the clerk put his hand over my face. And the judge said, "We don't sing in this court." That's what I remembered, everything. Then, pretty soon, years later, they started publishing the testimony in the papers. And one day I looked at it. Well, I was stopped singing, and then Kunstler said, "Well, what about if she recites the song? Would that be okay?" And then there was different conversations back and forth between the lay. "We know you're a nice singer, young lady, but we don't want to." And then I did say that, but I don't remember any of that.
I think there's a tape of it, right?
I don't know if there's a picture that was a handwritten portrait of me singing. I don't think it was. I don't know. Maybe it was taped. I don't know.
So
but
here comes.
That's part of the secret tape problem that we're now facing once again. Are there tapes?
Are there tapes?
Or not?
There may be tapes. There may be. You'd better hope there's not a tape.
Better hope there's not a tape.
So here comes the question. And it's not just escaping this one cycle and this one dependency. You have to overcome 3, and I left out cigarettes, you notice, because that's not good for a singer either. So what was the moment, the message, the guru, the self-awareness, the counseling that made you so successful at overcoming everything? I guess eating last, right? That was the last conquest.
I smoked for about 15 years, and when I tried to quit smoking, I plunged right into bulimia. That was what took me the next step there. But I haven't had a cigarette since 1970, and I was bulimic then for 11 years. When I was, it was a horrible last year, 77. I had to have throat surgery. I had to cancel everything. I was on the road with a big band. I think somebody told me they saw a sign on the billboard in Los Angeles announcing that I had just canceled 45 shows. I mean, that's a career killer right there. I couldn't sing because I had this hemangioma on my throat, which was definitely caused by drinking and throwing up. And I was dying of alcoholism. You know, I was so sick, and by now I'm drinking all the time, round the clock. So I would get to a city, and I'd do a concert, lose the voice, go up on the mountain, get a lot of prednisone, put my band up at some motel in Portland, and swim and drink vodka for 10 days until the prednisone kicked in, and I could sing another show, and then the same thing would happen. So the whole year of 77 was like the death knell on the career and the health and everything else. I was friendly with Jim Henson, and he booked me to go to England to sing on the Muppet shows with the Muppets in May, and I'd had to cancel. How many years ago? 39 years ago today. And I said, I didn't tell him everything, but I said, I am very sick, and I certainly can't sing. And I couldn't sing anything. So he said, well, why don't you come back in October when we get regrouped to go back? I said, okay. So all that summer and spring and summer and fall, I canceled. I drank. I don't know what I did. But I got myself together. I went on a month's silence, and I took a lot of prednisone, and I went to England, and I sang on the show. And I got through it. I squeaked through it, I'll tell you. And I came home and had the surgery. I went straight into doctor's hospital and had it. Secretly, you know, like nobody would discover. Anyway, people did discover. But never mind. Then, there I was. I'd had the surgery, and I was drinking myself to death. And the months went by, and it got worse and worse and worse. I finally found what we call an Eskimo. I found an Eskimo who helped me. And his name was Patrick, and he was divine, and he told me what he'd done to stop drinking. And I went to the doctor that had treated him, Dr. Gitlow, and he put me into treatment. I was still bulimic, you know, for 3 years sober. So I haven't had a drink for 39 years, but I haven't had the bulimia for 35. So you realize there was a period in there where I was sober and still with the food, chasing me down the hallways, you know, anyway. I was sober, thank God. And then I started going into food programs, and slowly but surely, all was revealed. And the fact that I had an eating disorder and that I could get well became evident.
But you went through it all. You tried Atkins, you tried
everything. I mean, that was through the whole
Jean Nidetch. You write
everything.
about Jean Nidetch in
Jean, yes, Jean.
Who lived in my neighborhood in Queens.
Oh, she did?
Yes.
She did.
And I think maybe she was the only thing I found in your book that I would change for the second printing is she was a very tall woman.
Oh.
I think you had her at a little undersized as a
I don't know about that.
She was a big lady. She was like 5'11" or 6
She
feet.
said,
and very big before she invented Weight Watchers. But
I called her, you know, when I was writing the book, I said, let me see where she is. So I found out she's down in Florida someplace.
Well,
and
everybody from Little Neck, Queens went to Florida.
So
that was
I called
easy.
Parkland.
I could have told you.
Parkland? God, I should have called you to ask you. And I knew that you lived next to her in Queens. So I called her on the phone. They said Parkland, I think. And I called Parkland Information, and I asked for whatever older people's places they had, and they connected me with some place, and I got her on the phone. I got her caregiver on the phone, and then she came on the phone. And we had this, I said, would you mind if I'd like to interview you. I'm writing this book about food, and I'd like to interview you. She said, honey, I'm 93, I don't do interviews. I said, well, let's talk a little anyway, and we did. She sounded like she was a 18-year-old. She had sprightly phrasing and humor, and she was just darling. But I said to her, how did you know when you started Weight Watchers that you needed a group?
Right.
Because she's quoted as saying, I was a fat woman with a fat husband and fat friends. And there was a program in New York, which was a free program sponsored by the government, which was for people who were overweight. And she got into that, but she said it was a little bit too hard, and she thought she'd be better off with friends. So she gathered a bunch of her fat friends together to meet every Saturday. It was hard to find them, but she did that. But she knew that you needed a group.
And that was the genius.
That was a
idea.
genius idea.
But it didn't work for you. You had to do it on your own.
Well, I had to find a group.
Oh, you did?
Same
Okay.
thing. I had to find an anonymous group. And as I found an anonymous group to stop drinking, I mean, I went to treatment. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I didn't do this by myself at all, ever. And so I went to treatment, and in 1978 I got sober, which is, I don't know how that happened, because I was very, very, I knew it all. You know, I knew everything about nutrition. I knew everything about everything. But I didn't know anything about this thing that was killing me. So I got sober, and then I started going to anonymous programs, and I got abstinent from bulimia, which was a miracle, total miracle. One day I was, 11 years into this situation, and the next morning I was not. So there are miracles. There are wonderful things that happen, and of course as you go along, you sort of find out. But go ahead.
I like your answers, but I was just thinking, maybe you heard me thinking aloud. When you said you needed others and you needed groups, I thought this was a good time to mention that along the way at an ERA rally, you met your future husband, Lois Nelson, who is here today. I want to introduce him because he is not only a terrific guy, but he is also, for those of you who have gone to Washington and seen the Korean War Memorial, which is one of the most astonishing memorials to our servicemen in the world, in the country, Lois Nelson was one of the designers who created it. So, Lois, stand up and let everybody see you. Or wave. So you met him at the same time you met Bella Abzug and Gloria Steinem.
Yes.
I love that. I must have met you at that same rally, because I met you at a Bella event.
We must have been in the ginger person that was changed from the ginger man
right,
to the ginger
person, or O'Neill's Alone.
O'Neill.
And I said, how great to meet you. And you said, excuse me, there's a really handsome guy over there. I've had enough of you. And there was Lois.
My friend, Gene Livingston, was dating his partner. And I had just broken up. I was such a wreck. I don't know how anybody stood being with me for 5 minutes. But anyway, this man who had been in my life was gone. And so she said, I want to introduce you to this guy. And I said, no way, I'm not interested. She said, I'll bring him to the fundraiser. This was 4 days before I went into treatment for alcoholism. And I had put off going into treatment so that I could do this benefit for Patrick O'Neill at the Ginger Man. And so Lewis came in the door, and we met, and he was really not my type. First of all, he was a gentleman. I mean, look, I'd been in the rock and roll world and the drinking and I don't know. I was extremely, I think one of the things that's gotten me through so much is that I'm basically a prude. I really do think that's part.
But
anyway,
I read the other book, so. So
I see.
Yeah, I know. I've read them all.
So we met, and he was lovely and saw me home, and we said, well, we would speak on the phone, and I kept calling him. I was about to go into treatment. I was very sick with some bug or else, and I kept calling him and asking him if he knew that, if he thought I should fly. I mean, I don't know why I would think he would know whether I should fly or not. But I would ask him and tell him, but I didn't tell him what I was doing. And then I went to treatment. I didn't see him for about, April, May, June, July, 4 months, something like that. And I was sober the next time I saw him. He looked very good. We had dinner at Orsini's. Actually, our rings have April 16th, 1978 on them, although it was 4 months before we actually got together. But we still keep that date because I think that's the miracle. He sort of flew in through the transom, and there he was, and a few days later I was sober. I mean, that's really very powerful, that kind of situation.
Yeah.
And so then what happened?
Now we're recovered. So
now we're recovering.
So what is your recipe now for wellness?
Well, first
and
of all,
sobriety and all of the other things that you are
I
dedicated
believe,
to.
somebody, I was turned on Leonard Lopate today. He was interviewing a guy who has a new book about the American food industry and how it gets to us, and, what parts of it are fresh, what parts of it are edible, what parts of it are terrible. And, if you look at a life, I was lucky because a lot of the things that have to do with perpetuating eternal youth, I was doing. I was exercising, I was trying to meditate, I was reading, I was curious. A lot of the things that we know are healthy, I was doing. I was also killing myself, but at the same time, I held up a certain level. When I got abstinent from bulimia, I was very blessed and very fortunate, but I wasn't really experiencing a freedom from the chatter in my brain about food. Sober, I never looked back. I mean, I've never thought of drinking, and I don't intend to. That never crosses my mind, but I have to eat 3 times a day, as we have to eat 3 times a day. And I was struck with the abstinence that I've now had for almost 9 years when I went to a meeting that I'd been to before, but it's called Gray Sheet, and it's very, very simple. It's actually the answer to all of our problems, whether we're overweight, whether we're anorexic, bulimic, concerned about weight, whether we want to get rid of 10 pounds or 20 or 100 in 45 days. It is the answer, and there's nothing complicated about it. And actually, scientifically, it is so fundamentally simple that it kind of blows your mind. And that is, and a lot of people are picking up these ideas. We were buffaloed by doctors for years. This is why I wanted to go back and write about the history of the diet gurus, what they thought about, what was their problem. Most of them had weight problems. Everybody from Lord Byron had a terrible problem with bulimia and other issues around food. And, the first Norman king of England had a terrible weight problem. And all of them, whether it's Atkins or Tarnower or Teller or Donaldson, they all had weight problems. And they said, what do we do about it? So the first thing we do is we take out sugar, flour, grain, wheat, and junk. We take it out of our diet. It works. You find that in a few weeks, you're slimmer, you feel better, your diabetic numbers are proper. You have lost the cravings for that junk for the most part. I mean, after about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, you're in the clear. You're in the clear from the yak. What am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? When can I have this? When can I have that? You're clear of that. So for a number of years, of course, I never binged again after 1982. Never binged again. But I had little things in the program that I was in at that point, wanted you to go see they didn't want to give you a food plan. They wanted you to go to a doctor and get a diet. Well, they know about as much about diet as I do about engineering to get to the moon. Most of them know nothing. I had this hand surgery the other day, and I won't go into detail, but I said to the doctor, I'll be taking arnica. Oh, poo-hoo. Well, I mean, I am an alternative medicine person. I believe in this natural approach. The guy on the radio show today said, I think that the source of our health now will be found not with doctors, but in the supermarket. And he's absolutely right, because it's what we eat, when we eat, how much of it, and how we deal with the sugar, flour, grains, corn, and wheat.
Yeah, I wish you hadn't added corn. You didn't put it in your first. Yeah,
by the way, they're all ingredients in alcohol. By the way,
that's interesting.
P.S.
Grain, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
And in my body, I turn those foods into alcohol, and they create the cravings. And when you're off of those things, you don't have those cravings.
That's interesting.
So the key is, of course, then how do you do that? Well, I can tell you that I looked around 3 or 4 years ago when I realized this was for real, and I've been doing this for years. And my top weight was 140, and I would always go back to it. I've probably gained and lost 1,000 pounds. But I couldn't get it off. I couldn't get that down again to 115 or 16. I couldn't get it off. And I tried Weight Watchers. I was back in the cycle again, like the wash and dry cycle. You do the Atkins and you do this, and it's not working. And I was in recovery. I hadn't had this problem with bulimia for many years. And I was eating sanely, and I was eating sensibly, a little of this, a little of that. Anyway, when I plunged into Gray Sheet for real, the first thing that stopped was the circus in my mind. They say the gorilla's not here, but the circus is still in town. Mm-hmm. And the circus left. And I started thinking about, I travel all over the country, all over the world, and I saw more and more and more and more obesity. Now, some of these eating disorders you don't see. Mine you didn't particularly see. Well, if you were looking closely, you would see it. But obesity, morbid obesity, obesity itself, the fact that it's wrecking the healthcare system in the country. It's not just the struggle with what are we going to do with healthcare and how to avoid this disaster that's going on in Congress. These people signed that thing. The Congress signed that thing. I mean, the healthcare, that's deplorable. I mean, that's unacceptable. That's they should all be in jail. That's what I think. However, I saw, it is obesity and eating disorders and problems that have been compounded
that
by
create other diseases, clearly.
That create everything, from diabetes, from cancer. We know cancer grows on sugar. We know all these things. So how do you do this? People say, well, it's about control. It's not about mind control. It's not about discipline. It's not about that. It's about allergy. These problems that we have are directly related to allergy. Nobody really talks about that. And so I decided I had to write this book because I want people to understand that there's this chemical thing going on. It's not emotional, quite frankly. I don't buy the fact that it's emotional. Maybe some people have a mental illness that must be treated with drugs, and maybe the side effects of that are weight gain. But for the most part in our culture, we just are eating the wrong things, which make us want to eat all the rest of the wrong things. That's what I think. Yeah, it's good to be in therapy. It's great to have a balanced life. We must exercise. We must find a way to pray, to meditate, whatever you want to call it, wherever you get it, whether it's watching the ocean or painting or, going up in the London Eye, whatever it is that drives your train. Have a lot of laughter in your life, do some service for other people. But if you're eating all these wrong things, they're making you eat until you have major diabetes problems. And so there are ways in which I see that, for instance, the guy who wrote Wheat Belly, he knows this. Wheat Belly is a very popular book now, and he's got it. We were confused and misled for decades because people said we couldn't eat fat. We couldn't eat fat cheese. We couldn't eat skin on the chicken. We couldn't have, well, now we know. I have skin on the chicken. I have skin on the turkey. I have 3 meals a day, nothing in between. I have 4 tablespoons of oil or fat a day because it takes fat to lose fat. I weigh the same as I've weighed for 9 years. Stable, it's 118. It doesn't go up and down very much. Salads, fruits, vegetables, this is heaven to me. It's heaven. Is it hard? No. Is it fun? Yes. I have the best food imaginable. I have delicious, wonderful meals. I have fudge yogurt every single day of my life.
I know the feeling. Fudge yogurt now too every morning for different reasons.
So possibly one more quick thing. I just want to say that it's nice if people, the most important thing is that woman who called me from San Francisco and said, I found your book, I got the audio, and I'm going for it. I mean, that's what means something.
Did you do the audio?
Yeah, I did an audio.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you touched on something that inspires
Sorry,
a
get
question.
off my soapbox
No,
now.
that's what we wanted to hear.
Oh, good.
And
More?
it's in the book with the actual menu plan, which is the appendix, which is
Yes,
very
yes.
useful. So you mentioned political anxieties and precarity and all of the issues that people may or may not be, but mostly are on both sides of the political spectrum, riled up about. Do you think that public anxiety adds to the pressures for all of these eating and drinking disorders? Are we in a time now that's going to actually, despite your good advice and the other book you mentioned, is it going to add on to the pressures on people to sublimate their anxieties by eating and drinking? Or do you think it's not a matter of the 60s or the 20 teens?
I don't. There are a couple things that I would say in answer to that. First of all, the food chain is really poisoned in many aspects. I mean, there's corn sugar and everything. And, you know, among other things, Lois designed the nutritional facts that are on every product that you pick up, a bottle of wine, a bottle of seltzer. So now we have more information about what's in food. But the secret things that we don't know about are creating havoc. And I have a feeling that the obesity gain throughout the country, I don't know about the rest of the world, although it's probably depends on whether it's in Japan or Italy or certain kinds of eating habits. But the fact is there's a lot of junk in our food. There's a lot of manipulation. We've kept the corn business, the farmers, and I love the farmers, but the people who grow this stuff, we've kept them in business by subsidizing them and also putting corn syrup in everything. And it's killing us. You know, it's putting on weight. It's creating the addiction and you know, that there's a video that Father Martin made. It's called Chalk Talk, and it's about what happens in the body with alcohol in the body. It's like somebody hitting you head over the hammer, hitting you over the head with the hammer, and then you want to have it again, hit me again, because it is the allergy and the compulsion combined. And this is happening within the food chain with the addition of corn in everything, and sugars, unknown sugars, not just the stuff that's available everywhere you look, but also hidden in your bread and in your pasta and in the things you pick up that are processed. So that has a lot to do with it. However, answering that question about whether anxiety over anything and everything, and everybody has problems, so there's no question about it, whether it's political, social, personal. The depths of our health, a centuries popular phrase in our culture is, change yourself and you change the world. And I believe that's true. And I believe that's all of our responsibilities.
So it's a no excuses philosophy.
It's a fundamental universe that you inhabit in your life. It's filled with challenges. It's filled with pleasure. It's filled with absolute impossible situations. Your job, my job, is to find out what those things are and to find a way to live with integrity within that, whatever those possibilities and those probabilities are. People have lived with integrity under every kind of situation imaginable in the world. They've also lived without integrity, but the whole point is to try to be, in whatever situation you find yourself, focused on, I am the solution to whatever the problem is. And if I can simply find out, somebody said to me this morning, I was listening to a meeting, and this woman said, you know, my job is to get 3 meals a day. Now, in between those, if I want to go and see the Dalai Lama, that's perfectly all right. So I think it's the discipline and the integrity of our lives within whatever system we find ourselves. Also, we have to resist. We have to resist what's going on here. We have to make our voices known. We have to march, as so many people are now. We have to speak up. We have to send notes. We have to send money. We have to, but at the center of our world, however much we can do that's outer, there's inner work to be done. And the inner work is what saves our souls in the long run.
It's an issue, just a very moving answer, and Wise advice. So we always turn to a few questions at the end, and I
Oh,
was
good.
checking my time, and you literally make time stand still because my watch still says 6:33, which is when we came on here. Does anyone know what time it is? We do? Oh, well, let's do a few questions, and then we'll go upstairs for our book stamping moment. We have a microphone. If anyone has a
There
question,
would be folk dancing afterwards.
right, raise your hand, and we'll recognize you. Questions in the front. Wait for the mic. Wait for the mic.
In the silence,
Right.
think good things.
First a comment and then a question. Not to excuse drinking or drugs, but remembering the late 60s, our society really normalized drugs and alcohol. I remember from my college days. I mean, there was really no shame to doing it at that time. And I think that today, what we have normalized is overeating and serving enormous portions of food. So that's my comment. And second, my question is, so from the normalization of drugs and alcohol in the late 60s, some of your fellow artists, 3 in fact in, I believe the year was 1971, all passed away at age 27, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jim Morrison. And I was wondering if that had an effect on you, if it made you feel more vulnerable, or if it made you feel somehow immune, like this wasn't going to happen to you.
That's a good question.
Every addict thinks they're going to live forever. And that they can do as much of whatever they want as they... Hi, Susie. We know. We know. Every addict thinks they can live forever. And, of course, many of us didn't, and tragedies. And we shift in our... my friend Susan Cheever, her last book was called Drinking in America. We don't deal with it. We don't want to deal with addiction. We don't want to talk about how deeply drunk and how addicted we are as a country to all kinds of things. I mean, to money, to fame, to oxycodone, to the opiates that these big pharma companies stuff down our throats via our doctors, handing them out for free. Have a sample, give it to your patients. We don't. So that's why I'm saying I grew up in a time when everybody was drinking, but that didn't make any difference. I was an alcoholic. Some of us weren't, which I always found astonishing. You know normies, don't you? A few, anyway. You don't invite them home, but, I mean, there are a few of us who don't overindulge in anything. And they're the rare and wonderful examples of, what it might look like. But as far as the peer group and the peer pressure, I didn't have any peer pressure. I just drank. I just did the best I could to stay both on the planet and off the planet. And yes, we've been encouraged in our addiction to sugars and grains and flours and all of the poisons that are around us. And by the way, if you don't have a problem with them, you don't. But unfortunately, given the numbers, I would say that most people are allergic to those foods. Most people. If you look at the obesity and the morbid obesity numbers in this country, it's clear that it's not just a small group of people who have this problem. It's not just 15 bulimics over in, Oakland. It's the greater mass of people who are trying to make it through and who get caught up in this because it's impossible not to get addicted if you're eating addicted things that addict you.
Maybe we'll do one more and then we'll adjourn. Yes, over here. Microphone coming.
First of all, we see you every single year at the Met. And Lucy and I, she's a big fan of yours. So I feel like I know you. My question is about the depression. You had it as a child. You perhaps, the alcohol and the eating was to run away from the depression or gave you some sort of solace. So where's the depression now? Did it go away?
Somebody said the other day they characterized the depression. Once in a great while, I'll see that smoky image coming around a corner at me. But I want to tell you that for the most part, I do the things that have kept me safe from depression. First of all, I would not let a week go by without exercising five times a week. I'm on that track. That's been that's been my solution to the depression. When I was drinking, I would take anything you had, but I do not take pills. I haven't had anything since except for major surgery, but I don't take anything since I got sober, and I exercise. The endorphins in exercise are a big, big, big help. And I don't know that any kind of recovery from depression is really going to be effective unless it's combined with exercise and healthy eating. Being a food addict, as I was, I know that I could become as despairing and as darkly into that horror as I could with alcohol, or just with nothing from what happens with food. I wanted to walk in front of buses, with the food. I mean, that drove me, after many years of sobriety, when I was still bulimic. I mean, I would be much happy to walk in front of a bus. But the depression lifted with the fact that I don't eat those things. And I do think that exercise is fundamental. And having, a life full of satisfaction and work that you love and people that you love hanging out with, and a husband who's wonderful and supportive and loving and creative himself. I mean, that all my friends that I know are creative, and I bask in that.
That comes with being
But it
able
comes
to
with,
be
of
out
course,
there,
it's part of it.
not being
It's
depressed.
the whole package.
Well, for all of your brave struggles, you've managed to nourish the country, no pun intended, with all of your beauty and your beautiful expression of your art. And we're so grateful for knowing you from both sides and for your amazing grace. And we are so grateful that you've graced Roosevelt House again. Thank you, Judy.